Have you ever played Mario Party and thought, man, this is great, but I wish it had more nuclear warfare? Or have you ever thought, man, these platforming controls are too easy to use? I wish they were unnecessarily difficult and clunky. Of course you haven't said that, because Mario Party's great. So great, in fact, that I wanted to remake it from scratch. So let me show you how I completely remade Mario Party from start to finish. This was supposed to be a quick project I could do in about a week. It took about a month. And it all starts with the very first thing I have to do. Online multiplayer. Because trying to get 4 people to come to my house to play this game is going to be nearly impossible. I wanted to be able to play with my friends online. Now, most people don't really know how online works, but it's important to set up an online game at the start, especially if it's going to be something like this with a lot of interaction. In the last game I made for this channel, Battle Blocks, I avoided adding online because I knew how much of a hassle it was going to be. First, the game chooses one player to act as the server. We call that the host. Then all the other players connect to that host. But when players connect, things don't just magically work. That would be too easy. Instead, each player sends the server information, the server dissects that info, and then sends it back out to everyone else. This is the very first step just to get players to see each other. Thankfully, I'm using the engine Game Maker once more, which is the same engine I used for a game called Step by Step, which already had online multiplayer. So my friend Froggy helped me out, and in 4 hours, we were finally able to see each other moving around.
Yo, 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 yo!
Oh my gosh, no way. So there's 2 parts to making a Mario Party game, I discovered as I was making it. The board and the minigames. Which do you think is going to be harder to do? Minigames are, well, minigames where players compete to earn a little extra money to help them on the board. An important part of the strategy of these games is adding the layout to the board. In fact, the board is arguably more important than the minigames because having a bad board can single-handedly ruin the game. For example, in Mario Party 1, there's a board with a bunch of cannons, and it's generally regarded as one of the worst and most unfun boards in the entire Mario Party series. Now, I'm not going for anything crazy, but I do want there to be a good amount of strategy. And there's a pretty big reason for it, because I'm doing something unique. I'm making the entire game in 2D. The reason for that is the engine I'm using, Game Maker Studio, does support 3D, but it's a lot harder to make a game in 3D than it is in 2D. And it's crazy because Game Maker heard I was trying to do this with their engine and reached out to sponsor this video, which is just crazy. Game Maker is the game engine I'm choosing to use for this project, and a game engine is really important for making a game. That's because instead of having to learn complicated coding languages like C++ or Java, Game Maker comes with all the tools I need to make a game right out of the box. It's free and is great for making 2D games, especially if you have no experience. My released game Step by Step might look great in the trailer, but prior to making it, I had no experience coding. Thankfully, Game Maker uses super straightforward and simple coding that literally anyone, including me, can learn it. And it even has block coding for those of you who are used to programs like Scratch. And Game Maker isn't some small engine either. It's been used to make some of the biggest and most recognizable games ever released, including Rivals of Aether, Undertale, Pizza Tower, and of course Step by Step, which is just as big as those other 3. And the best part is Game Maker is totally free to use. The only time Game Maker costs money is when you want to sell your game, and it's just a $100 one-time fee. That means you can develop your entire game for months or even years completely free, and then decide if you want to pay the fee to sell it at the end. And the fee is only $100. Steam charges $100 just to put your game on the website. Game Maker helped me out so much by sponsoring this video and is always the engine I use when I want to make a 2D game. So please click my link in the description to download Game Maker today, and now let's get back to Mario Party. Now, instead of my board being a top view, I decided to make it a side view where players jump between the platforms. And this actually caused a lot of issues. Cause of course it did, right? Turns out making this square land on these platforms that are spaced at different intervals and different heights is actually very annoying. After a few hours, I had it working, but then I ran into another issue. Turn order. When players join the game, they're each assigned a player number and are only allowed to roll if the current turn number matches their player number. Except, and just spitballing here, how does the server know if the player's turn is over? Well, it's tough because like in Mario Party, some spaces have interactions afterwards, so we can't just go with having 0 move spaces left means your turn is over. Instead, I had to get really creative and really complicated with how to determine when the turn is over. Now, you might be wondering what these colored platforms are for. Actually, maybe not. If you've played Mario Party, you can probably guess what these do. However, I'm not going to talk about them now because while making these little colored platforms were the very first thing I did for this game, I didn't actually make them do anything until the very end. And that's because I had to work on the minigames. Oh, right. Minigames. Now, when I started this project, I thought it wouldn't take very long. And if I was just making the board, yeah, I could have been done in like a few days. I didn't realize just how much work it is to come up with a single minigame idea. And that's mostly thanks to online multiplayer. Despite me using Game Maker, which like I said is easy, doing anything online is incredibly tedious and painful. Not to mention coming up with the idea itself is quite tough. Just because I have an easy and simple engine doesn't mean my brain can come up with good ideas, okay? I wanted to have all 2D minigames, but coming up with unique 2D minigames is like shockingly tough. You probably could come up with an idea for a minigame right now, but here's the next problem. How many minigames do you think I need to make? Good question. In Mario Party Superstars, the most recent release in the series, there are 100 minigames, but I don't need replay value like that. I just need enough minigames where there are no repeats. In Mario Party, that means a minigame after every round, or 20 total minigames. 20 minigames? That is a lot. I quickly realized 20 minigames was way too many, and I'd probably still be working on the project right now if I chose to do 20 minigames. So I decided that instead of a minigame every round, I'd do a minigame every other round, cutting my total games down to 10. And that is much more manageable. So let's get started. The first game I wanted to make was a little hockey minigame where you control your player with your mouse and bounce the puck to try to get it in your opponent's goal. Simple enough, right? Wrong! It would be simple, but when you're making a game online, nothing is ever simple. The problem is this: the puck gets faster the more people hit it, but once it gets really, really fast, sometimes it doesn't get hit by the player in the right way, and this is because of ping. Yep. Ping. The puck's position is currently being updated on the server, or the host, because that's the most fair. But that means the puck that everyone except the host sees is slightly behind the true position of the puck. Now, normally, this is fine, but when the puck is moving at Mach 10, just a single frame is a huge distance, resulting in the puck flying off in unintentional directions. Oh, also, you can shove the puck inside a wall and soft lock the game.
Wait, this is air hockey. Oh, I got stuck. Unlucky. Oh my god.
So that's fun. It was also around this point that I made a unique decision. Instead of making this game a free-for-all like Mario Party is, I decided to make the entire game a 2v2 team game. That means not only is every minigame a 2v2 game, winning the entire match is also a team win. When loading in, you'd be assigned a partner, and that partner would be your teammate for the entirety of the game. So after deciding on this, I tried to add some unique things that would help enhance this 2v2 dynamic, and I came up with the idea of a relay race minigame. One player of each team would be free at the start, but would have to make it up to the platform to unlock their teammate who would finish the race. But now I had to add some movement because up until this point, there wasn't any way to actually move your character except for just using your mouse like in the hockey game, which isn't really gonna work for a platforming race. So I threw in some super basic movement code, and we're talking about the absolute bare bones here. I mean, you can get stuck in the corners of blocks, no buffer, you can only jump max height. I mean, I really didn't put any effort into this. Some of these issues I decided to fix for future minigames where platforming was involved, but for this one, honestly, I felt just like leaving it because it was funny. And it made for a pretty frustrating and funny moment when I played with friends.
I want to go high enough. I did nothing wrong.
Yeah. You hit the corner, Reed, of the block above you.
Of what? The block above me? No, bro. What?
Now there's an extra problem that came with this game idea, a spectator camera. Because at this point, when your turn was over on the board, you would no longer be able to roll, but the camera would just stay focused on you. So it made it really difficult to see where people were. Obviously, the camera needs to be focused on the player whose current turn it is, and by that same logic, the player who's frozen in the relay race should be spectating their teammate who is not frozen. I'm gonna spare you the details, but this was a very tough thing to add. Lots of crashing, lots of the camera looking the wrong way when it should be looking at a different thing. It was just a mess, really. And once I got the camera working, I moved on to the third minigame, which for some reason I decided I wanted to do something way bigger than the other two minigames. I decided to make a farming minigame. Why? I don't know. Anyway, this game was going to be way more work than the other two, and I started by making a graphic for the crop growing, and then made 3 different kinds of crops, but I quickly realized it would be really boring to just walk through while holding left click to mine some crops, especially for 3 minutes. So I made a shop. Now take a look at this shop. 2 of these categories are different from the rest, and it's this last one. The first 2 categories are stuff that you purchase that directly affects the player's stats. That means they just affect their personal farming speed and movement speed. But the last category spawns things. That means the first 2 I don't have to do any online integration, but the last one does. And you'll start to notice that as I continued making games, I tried to avoid this last category as much as possible because adding things online takes so long. Have I mentioned adding things online is really annoying and hard? That's why you'll notice in the future that things like items or power-ups almost just affect the player that picks them up. That's easy to do because if the stat change doesn't affect any other player, I don't have to do anything online with it. For example, moving faster only affects the player who picks it up, so I don't actually have to add anything online related for that stat change. But spawning a boar, yep, that everyone needs to be able to see that. Anyway, at this point, I hadn't really realized how much effort it takes to add things online yet. This was kind of where I figured that out. So I signed myself up to make 3 online networking mobs. Now, the wolf and the boar are pretty simple. They just run around eating the crops and knock players up in the air if they get hit. You can kill both of them by jumping on their head. And the last thing I made was a nuke, which looked super cool. And honestly, the effects I added for this were just for the sake of the short I made on this game that got like 700k views, so good decision by me. By the way, in total, this minigame took 8 hours to make. Now, as it turns out, after making this farming game, I didn't really touch the project for a while. Spending 8 hours on a single minigame really bummed me out about this project. And it didn't help that I knew I needed to make at least 7 more minigames. So instead, I decided to try something I've always wanted to do but never actually tried. Making music. This game was gonna need music, and I figured, you know what? Why not try to make some myself? I found a free program called Linux Multimedia Studio. Most people refer to it as LMMS, and downloaded 50 gigabytes of sound fonts. Those are just instruments. My first songs were not great, but I definitely got better. It took me about 3 to 4 hours per track, and by the end of the project, I made what I considered my best work yet for my final minigame. And I'll show you that when we get to it. Anyway, as I start playing one of the tracks I made, it's time to make the 4th minigame. The 4th minigame is where things started to get a bit lazy. I just built a map, added a bunch of coins, and then set the first team to 25 wins. Jumping on these purple orbs would reset your jumps, of which you got 2, and your dash, which is a mechanic I would reuse in almost all future minigames. To use your dash, simply press shift and your character zooms in the direction of your cursor. In some minigames, a cooldown of your dash was on a timer, and on others, you simply got it back when you touched the ground. Either way, I was definitely starting to get a bit lazy, but that was all about to change, because I made an exception for the 5th minigame. I decided I had enough of just jumping around. I wanted to beat people up. That's right. Let's add guns. At first, I was really ambitious. I was gonna have a bunch of different power-ups and different weapons, but then I realized that's gonna be a lot of work for online. So I came up with a unique way to make different power-ups without changing too much of that. Also, side note, just getting power-ups to spawn and only be able to be picked up by one person, once again, thrillingly difficult. I came up with 4 power-ups: Rapid Fire, Shotgun Blast, Explosion Shot, and Death Ray. The nice thing about the first 3 power-ups is I just reused the exact same networking code and just changed some stats about them. You can see how each of these power-ups is just more bullets, which was easy to do. The Death Ray was a little bit more tricky, but still not too bad. I was willing to make an exception to my efforts of not wanting to do any extra online work than I had to, because I just felt it would be cool. The most confusing part of making this game was sometimes the bullets would show up on other people's screens, and other times they just wouldn't. And who would have guessed it was another online issue? The way sending stuff online works is you have to first classify what kind of number you're sending. I had been using what's called U16, which tells the server the number you're about to look at is going to be between 0 and somewhere around 32,000 as an integer, no decimals. But for some stupid reason, half of the arena was built on the negative side of the map, and you can't send a negative number with U16. So yeah, that was the issue, and it took like an hour to find it. Now I think I'm gonna speed run through these next games because really I started to get pretty dang lazy. For game 6, players just have to jump and dodge these orbs until the other team dies. For game 7, I copy and pasted the relay race with a new map and new controls, including a double jump. For game 8, I copy and pasted the hockey game. Like completely, like 100% copy and pasted it. That's just how tired of making these minigames I was. You guys have no idea how long these were taking. And finally, for game 9, I tried to make another unique game. It was supposed to be like tag, but it was so buggy and messed up and confusing. And it was so hard to tell what was going on that just honestly ignore I ever made it. Now, minigame 10, I wanted to be special, and I went all out on this minigame. But before I could make it, I had to update the board and actually make the spaces, you know, do stuff. In Mario Party, the goal is to collect the most stars, and if there's a tie-in stars, the player with the most coins wins. And in my game, the players have diamonds and money. Landing on a blue space gains you $30. Landing on a red space loses $30. To get a diamond, players make it up to this white space where they can spend $200 in exchange for a diamond. Now, just having some red and blue spaces isn't very interesting, so I needed to add some more stuff. And so I copied some of the Mario Party platforms. A yellow platform is a lucky space, which gives the player 9 potential lucky outcomes. And the black space is an unlucky space, which gives up to 7 unlucky outcomes. Some are really, really bad, like losing an entire diamond. The green platforms have 4 different things they can do but are not random. The first is a gambling challenge where the player pays $50 and has a 50-50 chance to get $150. The second is a challenge where you have to mash space bar as fast as you can, and however many mashes you get in 10 seconds, that's how many dollars you get. The third is a special and fun platform that makes you either swap with your teammates for free or spend $50 to bring your teammate to you. You have to do one of them. And finally, the fourth special platform takes you to the lucky zone with tons of lucky platforms, and it can only be accessed by landing on one of the 3 green spaces above. I also added items in an item shop, just like Mario Party. The items you can get aren't the most original. There's a dice booster, which adds 5 to your roll, and then there's a custom, double, triple, and even quadruple dice. And then I added 2 more things to the board: deposit spots and ally spaces. These are completely unique. For the ally spaces, passing one gives you the option to cancel the rest of your turn and stay on an ally space. If your teammate also gets to any ally space by the end of the turn, both you and your teammate get $50. And finally, the deposit spot lets you deposit up to $300, and when you pass a deposit spot in 3 turns, you get double your investment. investment. With these spaces and of course branching paths you can take, I felt like I had a pretty solid first map. Oh yeah, I also made a GUI which took forever, but looks pretty solid if you ask me. And if you're wondering about these pictures, I made this game for my friends, so these pictures are just us. And yes, that means one of my friends is Killa. After making the GUI, I made the 10th and final minigame. And like I said before, I made it completely different from all the others. Instead of it being on its own map, the final minigame takes place right on the board. And it's a winner-take-all minigame. Whichever team wins the 10th and final minigame wins the entire 20-round match. So what is it? Well, after the 20th round has finished, players have 1 minute to spend their resources on upgrades. Obviously, diamonds can be used for the best upgrades, but even normal money can buy some small perks. After a minute has passed, the shop disappears and players are suddenly able to parkour themselves on the board. Over time, these small platforms disappear, leaving only one large platform that's at the top of the map. Each player starts off with 3 lives, but might have more if they bought some from the shop. Falling off the map makes you lose a life. Players left click to attack and right click to shoot bullets that recharge over time. Getting hit by an attack causes players to lose knockback resistance and get launched off the stage. So basically, it's just Smash. The team who loses all their lives first loses the entire game. Speaking of which, I made a sick theme for this final game. It was absolutely my best yet. With everything done, it was time to patch bugs, and oh boy, were there bugs. Too many, actually. I wasn't able to find them all, and when we played the game, many bugs occurred. There were so many small issues that I had no idea what was causing them that I had to just pray wouldn't be an issue when we played the game. Like sometimes at the end of game 6, everyone's screen would just go black for no reason. Also, I tried adding rain, which I took from my platformer step by step, an amazing platforming game where you can't stop running and there are no checkpoints with fantastic music, online multiplayer, beautiful map design, and more. It took me a year to make. Please check it out on Steam. Anyway, for some reason, the game would crash when returning from game 6 because the rain was out of range or something. I don't even know how that's possible. No idea why that was happening, so I removed it. And I added a few safety features like a hotkey to skip your turn if something goes wrong. Something did. Because prior to that, if you couldn't finish your turn, the game was soft locked. Nobody could do anything. I also added a way to view the map if it's your turn and a GUI for all the mini games. And that was just another 3 hours I just brushed over, but you know, no big deal. And with that, I had finished the game. 1.5 months of work and over 100 hours on this project. I had made my rip-off Mario Party game, Diamond Dash. And now it was time to play it. However, the game we played was so unbelievably funny that I legitimately couldn't fit it down to fit here. Check out the top video if you want to see us literally die laughing playing this buggy mess. And if you want to download it for yourself, I'll release it for free if this video gets 1,000 likes. No promises about the bugs though. Please subscribe and download Game Maker with my link in the description. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Special thanks to User and my other supporters on Discord.